I am so excited that I'm finally getting to do a live stream. I'm really, really excited to be able to do this and actually get to hopefully interact with some people. I have a wonderful team who's going to help make sure that I am not ignoring anything because there's a lot on the screen and I don't really know what I'm looking at yet. So to start things off, I just figure I'll just jump into something that everyone's talking about that I feel like that we're not really looking at properly in media. So the railroad strike. What I keep hearing in media is that if these railroad workers strike, then we're going to deal with more inflation, and inflation is going to hurt the working class, obviously, because inflation sucks. So I am hearing all of these different media heads saying how amazing it is that the Democrats averted the strike. But they're really not talking about what the Democrats could have done to handle the situation in a more productive way. So these railway workers are not actually asking for a lot. They're literally just asking for a couple sick days, which most of us get because you get sick sometimes. And so what these railroad companies have done is they have literally gone and cut their staff drastically, and now they're overworking the staff that remains because the money runs everything. Oh, okay, somebody said something.
It says, you look like an actor that I saw in a Christmas movie.
Oh my God, you are the sweetest and I love you. Good Lord. Thank you so much. And I am so ready to go way off topic if anybody has any ideas of stuff to talk about. I just figured I'd start somewhere and we can go from there. So, these railroad workers, they want a couple sick days. And so basically Congress had the ability to say that these companies needed to give the sick days. So they could have stopped the strike and in the same package decided that the railroad workers get the sick days because Congress actually has the power to be able to make sure that the railroad corporations do what they should be doing. So it's not just a situation where you stop the strike. You can also make the corporations do whatever they want. And given these corporations, these railroad businesses have been going and making tons of money lately. Like they've literally been buying their own stock because they want to make more money. They have got the profits to be able to give these workers triple the sick days they're asking for. And they're still raking in the big bucks because they're essentially monopolies.
You have a suggestion.
Oh, what does a suggestion mean?
People want to see homelessness.
Oh, yes. Oh my God. Very good thing.
Los Angeles, if you know anything.
Oh my God. So Los Angeles, that's actually a really complex issue there. But homelessness is hitting everywhere. So I'll start with where I'm at and kind of broaden from there. Because I am a bartender, I work with the public. So I've talked to a lot of homeless people that have come into where I'm working and they have wanted to get jobs, but they haven't been able to get jobs because they are literally without any papers. And I've had trouble getting my birth certificate, my social security card, all these different documents together before because you kind of need one to get another. So if I've had trouble having access to a computer and all the different things I have access to, you can only imagine what it'd be like to live on the streets and not have access to any of those things. So there are a lot of homeless people that want to work, but they don't have the ability to work. You also have a lot of homeless people that are dealing with untreated mental illness. And once upon a time in this country, we had, asylums where we would stick people who were mentally ill and they were dreadful, horrible places. And it was kind of a horrific period in our society. But then we just decided to get rid of that and put nothing in its place. So now getting mental health treatment, even with insurance, is really, really difficult.
You gotta like
so,
stream.
huh?
You got a like on the
Oh
stream.
my god, you guys rock. This is so exciting. So yeah, I get distracted. So thank God for my team. So, talking about, oh yes, so mental health. There are people that I've seen come into my work that are like trying to talk to people behind me when there's just a wall behind me. So there's a lot of mental illness that can be debilitating, and without anyone who actually is available to help people get the medication they need when they're on the streets, or some people just need like a counselor to help them deal with other issues. So now I'll move to substance abuse. And I didn't start there because a lot of people look at homelessness as a problem that's only caused by substance abuse, and because it is unfortunately a big problem in the homeless community, it is used to demonize these people and make us not want to help them. So I didn't want to start with that, but in LA, there is a big problem with drugs, and that's definitely making it worse. Now, of course, if you're on the street and you're literally physically uncomfortable because you're dealing with the elements, then drugs are going to seem pretty tempting because you don't have anything to live for. You don't have a reason not to do drugs. And getting high one time is not as expensive as getting a place. So when you have nothing to live for and you feel hopeless and miserable and physically uncomfortable, and a lot of these people don't have basic health care. Well, does any of us have good health care right now? Like, barely.
On the stream.
Oh my gosh, you guys are so fun. Thank you so much. But when you have people who are, you know, dealing with these really uncomfortable conditions, then the last thing that that you're thinking about is, oh, if I do drugs, then it's going to make it even harder to re-enter society. Because a lot of these people, they're trying and they've tried. And when you give up and when you just don't even care if you live or die anymore because society has completely given up on you, then drugs are very, very tempting. And then, of course, once you use these drugs, then it is a small reprieve from your misery. So you do it again, then people become physically addicted. Now, we're also seeing in Los Angeles specifically, we are seeing a solid amount of petty crime, which is also being, fear-mongered against because people are not looking at the root cause of a lot of this. So a lot of people, they have no way of making money, and they have these stores, and in their mind, it's very understandable that they would feel like these huge corporations are screwing everybody. So stealing from them is a survival thing. So it kind of blossoms. And when you are physically addicted to something, the level of illness that you are dealing with, needing that drug just to be able to not want to kill yourself, then you're more willing to go ahead and do these things because you're in your survival mode. You're not living in the same sort of frontal lobe thinking that we're able to do when we have our basic needs met. Like think about, or basic needs, I said needs. So think about like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the very bottom, you're going to see things like shelter. You're going to see things like food. It's basic things to not be in survival mode. So when you don't have those needs met, then you're not going to be able to enter into other levels of existence where you are focused on self-improvement and where you are doing a lot of the things that make it easier to be a part of society. So the longer that this homelessness crisis is not dealt with, the worse all of this becomes. And the more people are stuck in this cycle of misery and survival. So, of course, another problem with LA.
Viewers.
Oh my God, people are. I really honestly didn't think anyone would show up. I'm like, ah! So So exciting. I love you guys so much. This is fun. So another thing with the population in LA, but also where I'm living, is the housing prices have skyrocketed. Like, I'm literally living in this 1-bedroom place that I'm paying double what I used to pay for a 3-bedroom place, and it is not very nice. It was ridiculous trying to figure out where I could film anything. But anyways, so housing prices are ridiculous. So you have a community that's already struggling to have housing, and then you make it so that it costs more to have housing than most people make, like, period. I recently looked it up, and I'm pretty sure I'm right on this one. If I'm wrong, please tell me, because I promise I will always be as honest as possible, and if I don't know something, I will let you know. But I'm pretty sure on this that if you're making minimum wage and you're working full time, you're hitting about $300 like a week. So you're barely scraping $1,000 a month out of the earnings that you're making. I think I'm remembering this correctly. So if that's the case, and I'm pretty sure that the average 1-bedroom like apartment in our country, I'm pretty sure it's close to $2,000. If anybody says anything, let me know for sure, because I want to be sure. But the point is, the math doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. So we're looking at a population, many of which are working, and this is kind of like the invisible homelessness that we're dealing with. Like, there was a guy who worked with me at work, and he hustled. He worked so hard. He always took my trash out for me at the end of the night. Like, an awesome, hardworking dude. Well, this guy, homeless. He literally would sleep like in the park and stuff, and you'd never guess. And he worked full time, and he just couldn't afford housing in this area. And of course, even once you are able to afford housing, if you've ever been evicted because housing prices are stupid, well then, how you gonna get housing again? Because these landlords, they literally make you pay money to apply for housing, which for people who have good credit and who haven't been evicted, that's like, okay, whatever. I pay this, application fee, whatever, I'm gonna get the housing. But for people who don't have good credit, because our economy sucks, and for people who literally don't have the rental history because they've been living on the street, because they also ask for like the proof of the landlords you've had before, then you're paying these application fees and you're getting denied. So you're just putting money out there that you're not getting back, and you're still not getting housing. So it's like, people don't even want to try, understandably so. So then people want to go and like see if they can stay in a seedy hotel, right? But that doesn't build any sort of like housing credit. Oops, I'm being asked something really quick. Hang tight.
Yes. You have quite a couple of comments.
Yes. Okay, let's talk comments for a section.
So, do you know anything about the Warnock win?
Yes. Oh my God. So
Someone says, I'm armed security, and so many choose to stay, even with basic needs and help offered. A lot choose to live this way. The system is barely manageable for people to get back on their feet, all from the same person.
Yes, that is super legitimate. And I've actually talked to homeless people who tell me that they prefer being homeless, so I've even heard that before. And honestly, I am convinced that they tell themselves that so that they want to wake up in the morning. Because imagine facing this like wall of challenges where you are being told by all of society that even if you do get a minimum wage job, you're not going to be able to work. So imagine dealing with that and not being able to find housing even once you get a job, even if you have a bunch of roommates, because you don't have the landlord history and everything. So, I'd probably say that I enjoyed it too. And maybe even start to believe it just so that I didn't want to off myself, So I do think that there are people that say that they want to live that way, but I just don't think that anybody starts out wanting to live that way. I really don't.
Have you witnessed Skid Row in person?
I haven't, but I have witnessed... I've witnessed a lot of stuff. And, I've actually gone through some pretty heavy economic hardships myself. And of course I've met people who have been through worse. I've had people who are homeless stay on my couch before. This has happened with multiple people, for periods of time. And so it really hits me, you know, because there are so many people that I have talked to that have had one bad thing happen and it's just all gone to hell in a handbasket. I was looking at this really interesting statistic, and that is that the top wealthiest people, the top 10 of them, doubled the money, their wealth during the pandemic, just since the pandemic started, right? But 99% of humans in this world have lost wealth since the pandemic started. So we're dealing with this sickening situation where we have corporate interests and wealthy people who are getting these, incredibly helpful laws passed that are allowing their wealth to grow while we're getting squeezed at the bottom. And we're told that if our wages are raised at all, then that's going to cause inflation, instead of looking at the fact that CEOs' wages have skyrocketed and that corporate profits have skyrocketed, and that a huge part of this inflation is because of corporate profits. But there was another thing that we were wanting to go to a different topic. Oh, Warnock. Okay. So that was a crazy race because Warnock is an interesting fellow. He did end up fighting for some good stuff while he was in the Senate. Like when Biden did his little tricky, like, we're going to take what was supposed to be $2,000 of stimulus and instead do like $1,400 because you already got $600. Oh, we meant that all along. That kind of tricky thing. Apparently he was, arguing against that. He hasn't been like super out in front of a lot of these issues, but from what I understand, the things that he's supported have been relatively good things for the working class overall. And then we have Herschel Walker, who literally has all of these people coming out about how he he took his therapist, his ex, and his girlfriend hostage and threatened to kill them. He held up knives to necks and just insanity. And then of course, he also came out and shared that he has been dealing with DID, or dissociative identity disorder, which has been more colloquially referred to as multiple personalities, even though that is incorrect. It doesn't really reflect the fullness of the disorder, and it does come because you've been through trauma. So I have so much respect for the struggle of somebody dealing with that, and I also am concerned that the people who decided to make him a candidate were not doing that for his own good or for the good of the country, because apparently he wasn't even going to treatment anymore. And that is a lifelong thing that you need to work with therapists to be able to manage, and he wasn't even doing that. And of course, not everyone with mental health issues does the violent things that he did. I myself have dealt with mental health issues, but he is someone who is violent and who does have a history of being dishonest and he paid for abortions. And it's so weird because he's like, oh, I want to pass a law where no one can get abortions. And I'm not saying that his act of paying for it is such a terrible thing. But what I'm saying is that he literally tried to force one of these ladies to have an abortion, which she didn't want it. And that is a terrible thing. That is really, really disgusting. And then to turn around and have all of this come out about him and to still see how close this race is just wild. And I think that Democrats really failed in the midterms, failed upward, because they should have been talking about economic issues. And because it's crazy, Republicans talk about economic issues and Democrats don't. So everyone thinks that Republicans are better on these economic issues. And honestly, right now, our government is not doing well on them at all. But there is a lane where these Democrats could have done things to help with this, with the economic situation that we're facing, including a windfall profits tax, which I think would be the simplest way to stop inflation in its tracks. And basically what it is it deals with corporate interests who they have decided to, okay, one second. Let me run through this really quick what it means, because I love this idea. They've decided to jack up their prices more than they need to cover the costs of making their goods so that they can make more money. And so we can look and see that this is true, because on their earnings calls to shareholders, they're literally talking about how they've jacked up their prices more than they need to and they're making all this extra money. So windfall profits tax would tax these corporate interests on any additional profits past what they're already making. So if they jack their prices up more just to make more money and not to cover increased costs, then they don't get to keep that money. That money's taxed away. So that would stop this price gouging. Okay, hang on. It looks like we got some awesome stuff to talk about.
What are some promising things and people happening in the world today?
Ooh, thank you. So we do have a lot of things that are good that are going on. And I do think it's really good to focus on some of those things. Thank you, Get Some Mojo. So the thing that makes me the happiest is that people are starting to notice that things are wrong. And I know that's like a weird thing to be the most excited about, but when people start paying attention and when people start looking at the economic realities and that we're all getting screwed over, then we can come together and we can actually deal with these issues and make things better. So I am really, really encouraged by the fact that people are caring about this and they're becoming enthusiastic about it. And I have had a lot, they say as a bartender, you shouldn't talk about politics. So I talk about politics with everyone. And lots of people that I completely disagree with, I've actually been able to have conversations with, as long as I start the conversation with the idea that we can make our country better by disagreeing with respect. And it's amazing that I can talk to people that are very far down conspiracy rabbit holes. And as long as we approach this like our conversation and its existence can make the world better, these conversations are starting to happen. And I feel like if things weren't such a mess, then these conversations would not be happening and we wouldn't be able to make things better. So let's see, who are we? West Coast. Oh, yes, the Skid Row question. Thank you. I'm wondering, have you witnessed Skid Row? Because I've heard a lot about it. Do we have anyone who's I've missed? If people can work remotely, that's actually a really good idea. And I think that since people have been we've actually had a decrease in the amount of workers that are available. And the Fed, because they're evil, literally is trying to jack up interest rates and create unemployment so that we're willing to take less pay for our work. But he ain't trying to stop these CEOs from making more money. No. The problem is the workers, not the CEOs jacking their salaries up. It's the workers that are doing it. So it's pretty crazy how we have the Fed trying to cause unemployment, because even though everyone seems to think that Biden kept the border wide open, he's literally kept most of the same border policies in place. So we've had a drop in our immigration numbers. So we have less workers overall. And we also have a bunch of people that died. So that cuts down on the workers that are available. And then there are also a lot of people that were able to start working remotely and to do something in the digital economy. And that got rid of workers in these other sectors as well. So we're lucky because now we do have more power as workers to ask for things that are fair. And these corporate interests really need to recognize that they can take a weensy little cut in these out of control profits so that people can afford a place to stay. Are we having anything that I'm missing?
Let's hear more about inflation.
Yes. So if we go back to inflation, inflation is really complicated, and that's a reason I wanted to address it in this stream, because I feel like it's one of those things that's really good to have a dialogue about. There are different things that are causing it other than corporate price gouging. So obviously we're dealing with some supply chain issues, and it's made worse by the fact that our corporations are trying to suck every last dime they can into their profits. So we're getting a lot of our raw materials cheap from places like China. Well, China has the zero. I tried to say one because they got the one child thing back in the day. So the zero COVID policy, where they're literally just like locking down apartment areas. And of course, thank God, the people have rose up and they have come together, and now China is officially not doing this zero COVID strategy and is trying to get people vaccinated, which is, definitely going to help the entire world economy, because when suddenly these raw materials are not available because these different factories in China have been shut down, now that makes it so that the cost of these materials are increased, and then the cost of what is made from those materials goes up just to cover it. So that is another thing that could be dealt with through policies. And what we could do is we could actually encourage corporations to make things in America, and then we're not going to run into as many of these supply chain issues, because we don't have to rely on the stability of other countries. And then we're also not dealing with issues at our ports that we had that also caused inflation. And then, of course, oh my God, the situation with truck drivers is absurd. Like, these companies are telling these truck drivers that they need to slowly buy their own truck. And that sounds good, like, oh, then you can keep all of your money. But that means that when something inevitably goes wrong on the truck, then the driver is responsible for it. And so drivers can work all week and literally owe money, and not get paid. So we are losing truck drivers because the way that they're paid it should not be legal. It's disgusting what these companies have done. And this is the problem with us letting corporate interests do whatever they want, because corporations are not moral. It's okay. I went to business school. We're taught not to be moral. We're legally required, when you're a part of a corporation, to maximize profit for your shareholders above everything else. So of course things are going to be done that are going to hurt workers on a massive scale.
I have a comment.
Comment.
What should we do? Strike, band together, raise minimum wage?
Lots of those things. Ultimately, one day I would love to see a general strike, because, oh my God, honey, if we could shut down our entire country for one day, it'd be amazing how fast Congress would do something like, whoa! And I mean, literally, we would have to do an absurd amount of networking. So first, we're going to just have to grow our movement. And that is going to take time. But one day, that would be super, super, super effective, but ridiculously hard to make happen. So strikes are amazing. And I support the railroad strike. I think they should do it anyways. And yes, it will cause more inflation. But you can see Congress is freaked out about it. And Congress moved real fast to say that workers had to accept this thing that they weren't willing to accept. Now, workers can still strike. I think it's called like a mad dog strike. It's a mad something strike. Sounds all crazy, right? But they can still do it. It's just an unsanctioned strike. And honestly, I hope they do, because Congress will turn right around and be like, okay, give these people some sick days. And the corporate interests can afford it. Congress is just legally bribed by these companies. And so they're going to do what the companies that are bribing them do. They're not going to do what the workers need. But it would be so easy to give these workers some sick days. And if we screwed up the economy like it would to shut down railroads for a day, like trillions of dollars for, I think, a day or two, it shows that these workers have power and they're not asking for too much. And Congress literally just has to say, give these guys some sick days. And they did, but they did in a sneaky way that was designed to fail, because if they had kept the sick day package in with the package to stop the strike, then everyone would have to vote for it to save the economy. But because they separated the packages, they made it possible to save the economy while also voting against the couple sick days, because these massive corporations spend bukus of money on, bribing politicians. And actually, if you look, there was actually a study that was done over like, I think it was like 3 to 5 years, somewhere in there. And like the top 20 corporate interests, I actually wrote this down because I was no, hang on. Oh, the top 200 corporations spent $5.8 billion on lobbying and legal bribes to politicians. But why would they do that? Because they literally got $4.4 trillion back in subsidies. Like, you can't get a return on investment like that anywhere in society, even with crypto, which ain't working anymore. But these corporate interests, they pay off politicians to pass laws that help them. And we can see that these railroad companies, they have, the ability to buy our politicians just like everyone else. And so our politicians, they do what's better for corporations rather than for the average citizen of this company, rather than for workers. And the media doesn't talk about it, because where does all these campaign funds, where does the campaign funds that are bribed, where does it go to? It goes to media ads. So if media talked about how screwed up it was that we are literally allowing corporate interests to give bukus of money to politicians, then literally they would lose their cash cow. And it costs a lot to run a media company. There's a lot of money in media. So of course they're not going to talk about the fact that a lot of these crappy political moves are coming from the fact that, that corporate interests are giving bukus of money to our politicians. So let's say where we're at now.
I don't know.
Okay, no worries. You're good. So, is there anything that I should chat about that we are wondering beyond that? Because I can go on forever, but I did want to actually answer any questions or let this kind of be guided by what y'all want to do. But I can keep talking all day.
About the Goblin song?
I don't know about the Goblin song.
I don't know.
I haven't heard about the Goblin song. But hey, now I'm gonna have to Google it because I'm just obsessed with Googling everything. It's pretty cool to live in a society where if you have a question, you can look it up immediately. Like, that is the coolest thing ever. And it's really put a wrench in these media companies' plans because they can't completely set the narrative anymore. Because when you listen to these media companies that are making so much money off of the corruption in Washington, they're not going to tell you about what a big deal it is that we allow companies to give so much money to politicians. They're just not going to talk about the issues with Citizens United, but there were also other Supreme Court decisions that allowed this corporate capture of our political system. So, could there be a law that requires all corporations to have workers on their board? Oh, yes. And that's actually a really good idea. That is something that could help for sure. If you have, workers being a part of the decisions of a company, then they're not going to be as likely to vote to offshore the company because they're going to lose their jobs. And that happens a lot where companies literally just vote to go to another country because there's, better tax laws there or something. Although we found out relatively recently that in one of the Dakotas, the tax policy is so friendly to corporations that there are a ton of people that are parking their money there, just like they're parking it off in the Cayman Islands and whatnot. So we really have allowed this particular corporate capture of our country, this oligopoly, to grow out of control. And it's completely out of control. And unfortunately, because corporations are so powerful, we are now in a situation where we have to use our government to rein them in because there's nothing else powerful enough to do it. And that's why we can't give up on our government. We have to make it better. We have to get better politicians, and we have to make better policies. But we can't give up on our government because that is the best way, other than like a general strike or worker strikes in general, to get these corporations under control. And we're looking at inflation across the board in all these different countries. And of course, inflation is happening, partially because Russia's being such a dick, and they're, going in, having this war in Ukraine, and they're causing our energy prices to get all jacked up. And when your energy prices are jacked up, then it's going to cost more for fuel, it's going to cost more for transport. It's really messing up the economies of the entire world. But I also think that because corporate interests are multinational and they're in a bunch of different countries, that is definitely invite to join live. What does that mean? What does it mean to have an invite to join live?
Someone else's live.
I don't know what that means. Okay. I'm learning, y'all. Because these corporations are literally existing in all these different countries. We're watching inflation happen in all these different countries. And I think that they are a huge part of the reason that all these countries are experiencing inflation, other than the obvious like fuel costs and of course supply chain issues. And unfortunately, a lot of other countries in this world are falling to fascist tendencies or are wanting a more authoritarian leader, because what happens when you are really, really struggling and when you can't make enough money to have housing, to live, to have a reasonable life, then you are running into a situation where you are dealing with these forces that are making you feel like there's no way to get ahead. And when someone comes out and says that there is a group of people, and usually they're immigrants, and they're the reason you're suffering, that is a simple solution for people, and they're more susceptible to believing this line, even though that's not why things are bad. It's not because of some, powerless immigrant, collection of people. But when you're struggling so much, you're a lot more likely to believe these people who are strongmen and who have authoritarian tendencies and who are coming up and giving you a simple solution to very real problems that you have. And so we're seeing this issue with authoritarianism rising all over the globe, which I think also leads back to inflation. And, yay! Everything is because of inflation.
Wanting to hear about Putin.
Putin. Oh my God. Putin is a mess. I at first thought that he was potentially just nuts. And I also initially didn't think he was actually going to invade, because I doubt our Defense Department, because, hello Iraq and stuff. So I was a little off on this topic. So I let you know that I've struggled with being correct on this one. But I've heard recently that there is a solid likelihood that he is having health problems. So there's a possibility that he feels like this is his last chance for glory. And it's possible that he doesn't feel like he has anything to lose if he's looking at, death sooner rather than later. And, he's surrounded by a lot of people that would probably step in and continue the war. There's a lot of people who are behind this. Of course, you look at the amount of people who've literally left Russia, and you see that Russia is being weakened considerably. But I do think that if Putin loses the war, he probably believes that he will lose all his power and potentially even be killed because things are crazy there. So I do think that he is in a position that makes him more willing to make bad decisions, like using nukes. And that is the real concern here, because if Putin uses a nuke, then NATO, I can't imagine that they wouldn't respond. And then we got serious problems. So it's amazing how well Ukraine has done pushing back and getting Russians out of their territory. And super recently, I saw that there was some sort of like drone strike that was a little too far into actual Russian territory. So there's definitely a lot of tension there, and it's a very scary situation. And especially when we saw that Poland, a member of NATO, had that had essentially, an explosive dropped in there that we thought was from Russia at first, but turned out to be from Ukraine's anti-artillery explosives. So that was really frightening, and I really hate how the media jumped on that so fast and was so willing to make us want to go towards World War III. And now that we have nukes that would make Hiroshima and Nagasaki look like warm-ups. So our media is not being smart about this, because they're all about making money. And that's the problem when you have a system where money matters more than anything else. So I'm afraid that Putin has been backed into some sort of corner. And I feel like that in Ukraine, because they're doing so well, they're not going to want to negotiate a peace settlement where they lose anything. And I think a lot of them don't even want to give up Crimea, which was taken a long time ago. But I'm afraid that if Putin doesn't at least have something to save face so that he doesn't lose control of his country and lose power, I'm concerned that he is not going to be willing to do any sort of peace negotiations. And I think that the United States has been using this conflict as a way to weaken Russia. And of course, I think it's great that we, supported Ukraine. And I think that Ukraine has every right to want to protect their territory. And the bad guy here is Russia. Very clearly so. But I am concerned that the powers that be in the United States like how Russia is getting weakened, and Russia has the ability to drag this out for quite a while, even though they're dealing with manufacturing issues, and they have really old weapons of war. They have tons of people that they're just throwing at the conflict, and I'm afraid that because Putin has nukes and because he might be in a place where he might be ill enough to feel like he has nothing to lose, and he might feel like he's going to lose control of his country if he doesn't have anything to show for it. I am concerned that this is a situation that is not really going to resolve anytime soon, and that most of the people involved are not angling for peace as much as I would want them to. And of course, Ukraine has every right to decide that they want to fight until they get Crimea back. But the concern is that if Putin literally loses something he had before this awful war of aggression that he has started, then he might be willing to do really stupid things, because if he loses power and loses control of his country, then he might feel like the world is ending for him anyways. I don't know what's in his mind, and I really hope that I'm wrong about all of this, but it's looking like it's going to be a really difficult situation. And I think that Putin might just be hoping that Ukraine is going to stop getting help from people as inflation is jacked up everywhere, and is maybe hoping that Europe is going to be, you know, so starved for energy that they're willing to start trading with them again and not support Ukraine as much. So it's possible that Putin is just hoping to wait everything out and, you know, wait for the rest of the world to be so embroiled with our own economic woes that we don't want to help anymore. And I cannot say what will happen with that. It's really a horrific situation. And it's super horrific that Putin has been attacking the electric grid in Ukraine and making it so that they're literally trying to freeze people to death. You know, the tactics that he's already using are terrible. And I can only imagine that he's going to get worse if he, you know, is failing. Because I don't think this guy likes to fail. He's pretty hardcore. But yes, I mean, it sucks that Putin is acting the way that he is. It's pretty horrific. So, let's see. Am I missing anything? Well, if we don't have anything else that we want to discuss, I'm just going to go ahead and sign off. If anybody has, we have somebody else come in, Rosie D223. Is there anything that you wanted to discuss? Because I definitely don't want to disappear right when we have some new people. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and go so that I can do this hopefully more often and not wear out every single topic there is, because Lord knows I can talk all day. So thank you so much for coming in. That was really, really sweet of all y'all. I really appreciate it. And if you come up with anything that you want me to talk about, just leave a comment on my latest video. I will definitely check them out and keep them coming. So thank y'all. I gotta figure out how to turn this thing off now, because Lord knows I'm not sure I know how.
At the top of the screen.
I do not see an X, but I see something that looks like a power button.
There you go.
Ah, look at that. All right. Bye, y'all.